Hello, everybody, and welcome to Stoughton Writers Group on TV. I'm your host, Mike Hartman, the author of Hartman, a memoir. Today, we're doing our 15th show recorded since we started in late July. And this is a guest I wanted to have on for a long time because I admire his writing. I think he's a great teacher of writing, too. And I want to welcome my old friend, Mike Atwood, to the show. Thank you, Mike.
Hey
And
Mike, how you doing?
good to talk to you again. And I really want to have you on the show because part of the Stoughton Writers Group is to talk about writing and teach people to write and encourage people to publish that first novel, first story. I know you did that a long time ago, but you also teach writing. So we'll talk about a little bit about that. But first, we want to talk about your new book, which you honored me by letting me write the blurb to Moral Dilemma. Tell me a little bit. Yeah, hang it up. Good. Look, the cover looks great. I mean,
Thanks. Yeah, no, we worked, I had a lot of ideas about it. We can talk about that later, but it really came out fantastic and we did the British trade paperback size. So I really wanted the book to look a little bit smarter. My previous books were a little bit thinner and if you compare. So this was the previous book, The Moral Infection, and then Moral Delirium. So I liked it, but it was a little bit thin. And I was over in England, and I saw these trade paperbacks that I really like, and they're just the right size, and it's doing great. But to get back to your question, the idea about the book, I wanted to write a series. I'm always into like detective fiction, and that's a big thing that I love to read and certainly watch on television, various series. Um, but there's a lot of mystery and suspense stories in here. I've kind of touched upon that genre in the past, but there's some new stories taking different angles, different characters. I use a lot of female protagonists in this one, a little bit different than my past, and it's interesting to get in the shoes of a character and get up and go. And yeah, so I mean, a lot of these stories come from just I brainstorm quite a bit, and I think it's really going back to detective and suspense stuff that I really love. I love the twists in those stories, and I think readers will be captivated by some of the plot surprises in my stories this time around.
the characters are enriching too. Like you really describe them a lot. They have a lot of problems. The professor and one of your characters, and they look like they spent a lot of time with counseling after they've been through your chapter. But how
Yeah.
did you develop that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I've always been a high school English teacher. I had a chance to be in an MFA or a Master's of Professional Writing program out in California. And it was very interesting to see how the professors, existed in those programs. And I just kind of created like, a morally, distraught, this character's moral compass was a little off base, and he gets involved with, a co-ed, and it leads to a lot of problems for him. But then, I won't give away the ending, what appears to be and what actually is. It kind of is a twist in that story. But, the whole idea of, teaching creative writing at the college level, it's always been something that interested me. And, but it's a lot different than high school
Yeah,
teaching,
sure. I would
you're,
argue your characters are morally bankrupt, but that's just my
yeah,
opinion,
morally bankrupt is the correct phrase. Absolutely. Mhm.
But I liked them though. I wanted to know what they did, what happened
Yeah.
to them too. What was it like switching in the books you wrote about one thing, another thing, another thing? What was that like switching them around a
Well,
bit?
I think I get bored sometimes if I'm reading, that's been my trouble. I've written a few drafts of novels, but being with one character for 300 pages is kind of tough. If it's a 20-page story, I feel like I can switch gears and go to another character. So, and again, it's just I brainstorm, I come up with these ideas, I do a lot of notebooks. I don't write paragraphs with Chat GPT, but I've certainly played around with, what would be some possibilities with characters, character development, and that's been a big battle in the high school classroom and on the college campus about kids writing essays. But I found it as a tool to kind of develop ideas, and even look at plot twists and things like that. I don't always go with what it says, but it gets me thinking. So, but I think a lot of readers get bored with the same character over 300 pages. My idea is that we kind of switch around, and there's many different characters in there. So, yeah.
now you just mentioned, I want to talk about it because it was further down on my list to talk about, but AI in writing, how do you see that evolving as a novelist and as a
Well, it's
teacher?
not going away. It's not going away. I went back to church the other day and I listened to we have Providence College professors come and actually say mass. They're part of the fathers down there. And one priest talked about AI. He's a professor of theology, and he went to a conference and he got into an argument with this AI instructor because the colleges want their professors to go to these conferences to learn what the possibilities are. But he compared it this way. He said, when you use AI, it's more of a transaction. It produces a paper, right? He looks at as just you put something in, you get something out. But when you teach writing, it's about transformation. And he made a comparison to religion too. It was in there in his homily. But I thought that was very interesting that he got into, you know, it's just producing something. It gives you a product, but it doesn't teach you the process. And there's no transformation that it goes on between, when we teach kids in high school, we want them to develop their skills to write on their own, whereas AI kind of produces it for them.
How worried are you that students will turn in AI papers generated only and you won't be able
Well,
to?
a lot of my department is going to paper and pen because they're tired of it. So they're getting off of Google Classroom, they're getting off a lot of that online stuff, and they're moving back old school because it's become so, rampant in like the high school experience. So they want their students to be able to write on their own. And I always did it when I taught AP language and AP literature. We did a lot on paper because of that problem. It's because then it was like Google could kind of help, but now AI will write the whole paper for you. So it's it's been since the internet came around. I'm sure education has changed because of research methods and things like that. But AI actually will construct an essay, and it will learn your a writer's style too. So you can write it in you could ask it to write it in a certain voice of a writer that you may know. So or it's pretty amazing what it does, but there's some emptiness to it too. It's like I said, it's a transaction.
How could you see it being used successfully for writers?
I mean, again, personally, for me, it gives me creative ideas. I think it could really help kids plan things, but we don't want them to use it to construct the entire essay. I think it's more of a brainstorming device in many ways, but it's a slippery slope once you go down there and start getting into AI and using ChatGPT. You don't want it to do the whole job for you. And that's what we want to preach because like I said, going back to like an AP language, you have to type the essay on the day of the exam yourself. And if we constantly go to ChatGPT and AI, they're not going to learn the process, and that's part of it. But
Stay on the subject, kind of staying on the subject a little bit. I know you teach writing. A lot of people watch these shows and watch the videos and things like that. They want to be writers. What advice do you give to somebody to be a writer?
well, I think you should start doing it. I mean, it's one of those things, I come from a running background, that I ran in high school and college, but I wasn't very good at it. And I just started doing it. And then, you start to see models of success and you start to follow that. So I really think people should just start their notebooks, start jotting ideas, do plot outlines, try to write a chapter, try to write a story, just basic stuff, but start doing it, and it starts with a paragraph. It starts with a sentence, and I think a lot of people are afraid to do it. But a lot of people have great ideas about plots, but it's really putting the pen on the page and getting it down or start typing.
I find that people don't have the discipline to write. Well, you're a runner, so you bring discipline to the process of writing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of, and again, I think athletics teach you a lot, but I spent the summer really hammering out a lot of stuff. I wrote a novel of about 300 pages, and it was, if you have the schedule where you can get up every day, I have the advantage of, time off in the summer. that, I got up, had my cup of coffee, and I hit the keyboard. I might check a few emails. I may, wander on the internet for a little bit, but I put those, 3 hours in the morning, and then I'd have my afternoons kind of off. And so you gotta like earmark, what I hear, and I listen to a lot of writers' podcasts, is that you have to have that time, whether it's like John Grisham, who used to get up at 4 in the morning and write until 7 o'clock, or you're a nighttime writer. I've heard a lot of different styles from people who are successful writers, but you have to have that time earmarked where I'm going to write for an hour or two, and it does start with writing for 1 hour a day. You'd be amazed what you can get out of that.
Is 3 hours like your limit, do you think?
In summertime, I mean, because you sleep in a little bit, you wake up, get your coffee, and get started. Yeah, usually like a 9 to 12 is a good stretch for me. If I go into the afternoon, I feel like I get a little bit lackadaisical and a little tired. But I really can knock out a lot when I have time off, and I have vacations. If we don't go away, I'll be on the laptop for a good chunk of the morning during vacations too. So I write when I can. Weekends are tough because, middle of the school year is very tough to do anything just because there's a lot going on, you know.
When you write, the English teacher writing to correcting mistakes as you go along writing, or do you wait till the end?
I don't think you should do that. I think, I've heard a lot of writers like Stephen King or T.C. Boyle is one of my favorite writers. Who actually was a professor at USC. I didn't have him in class, but he was there. But they're perfectionists. They write a chapter, and it seems like from what I've heard in interviews is they really try to do it perfectly as they go. Um, I think you just have to lay the foundation, and then you go back and correct it.
I find it
Um,
hard to do that with spell check though, because if I see a word misspelled that I typed wrong, I want to go back and change it like right away. It offends my
yeah.
sensibility as a as a writer, a writer that I made a mistake.
It could distract you if too many
Yeah,
errors were in there, but to me, it's like I'm going to go back and get that later because I want to keep the flow of the story. Um, and if you're in a groove and you have a good plot going, you don't want to put the brakes on. You want to let that creativity flow until it's done. Then go back. When you have writer's block, that's the time to edit.
yeah, that's a good tip. I want to
Yeah.
get back to your writing. When you say the short story, developing the short story characters, how would they develop differently than when you're writing your novel?
Well, I think what I like about it is that they need to be developed very quickly because you could be going 10 pages, you could be going 15, 20. So it's important to really characterize them early. I love a lot of indirect characterization. Sometimes, I mean, some writers, like a Cheever, sometimes they do direct characterization. They really want to get established who the person is, what's their position, what are the hours that they work, like it's really, what their personal values are. Sometimes that's a good way to go in a short story too, that you want to like establish that right away. And then, and then I think like you just have a short amount of time for character development. So you really have to get on it. And it's like in a novel, you can kind of drag it along a little bit. I feel, but and maybe the character's arc, you don't really realize what's going on until later with them. So yeah.
You've done a lot of different writing. You've been a journalist, you've been a comedian, stand-up comedian, which I don't know how you did that. That is one of my biggest
I,
fears.
the fact that I'm not doing it speaks to how well I did it. Um,
But what
yeah,
was
yeah,
the
that was
process
fun.
like
That was
writing all that though? I mean, the changes, did that help you write when you went to write a short story or a novelist? When you
oh
changed
yeah, and I always love some dark comedy in stories. I love a story that there's some the reader might laugh at some of the characters' expressions. I think I was influenced a lot by like a show like The Sopranos and the great writing, the script writing in there that if I write a story about the mafia, I can't help but go back and think of some of those scenes. And when a character says something that's so off base and you know, you have mafia guys talking a certain way and it's funny, you know. So I think it's nice to kind of slip in that dark comedy in those stories.
The characters in your short story have a little bit of Soprano-esque when you think of it, how they're developed and all. I think we get
Yeah,
it in
I
the wood
mean
there,
that
but
was a very influential show. It was a very influential show, and I did a lot of reading of the scripts that came along with that, and the dialogue is to me was the best. You know, there was one show where like Christopher and Paulie were chasing this Russian out in the woods. And Tony calls and tries to inform him. I guess they took off on him, and Tony calls to say that he was some sort of combat soldier and be careful of him. And he worked for the interior minister back in Russia or wherever he was. And the phone kind of got crackled up, and Paulie says, he's some sort of interior decorator, or he gets a complete,
I think this was called Pine Woods. Yeah, yeah, that
and they
is
go to
funny.
the apartment, yeah, Pinelands, yeah. And they went, and Christopher goes, "Geez, his place was a mess." You know, it had nothing to do with, they just got the characters got the information wrong. But I thought, stuff like that, moments like that, I'm like, that's hilarious. How can I work that into a story? You know.
In More Delirium, do you have a favorite character out of all the ones that's in the book?
Um, yeah, I like the Ted Hawthorne one. I like the guy who was the professor on the campus, and his delusional state of things. Because it's kind of funny because a lot of you could say, well, is this are the characters you? Not at all, like up front. But the guy was trying to publish his. He couldn't write a novel. That was part of his. He couldn't. He was a short story guy who ended up in academia. So like those parts are real. I'm really, yeah, really would like to publish that great American novel and the struggle with it. And, and he gets this great idea because he meets somebody. And, I thought that was, one of those that was connected to me. That was definitely, but his moral compass was a little bit off base. That is not connected to me.
He was kind of anti-society too. He was kind of a little bit down on his luck about society. He had a little
Yeah,
frustration.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He got divorced and he was living in New York City and he's stuck in this small college town and now he's drinking all the time and so a lot of that stuff, I know it, I've seen it, but it's not personal. It's not something like I'm writing about my life, but it's certainly something that I've seen and that's good. I'm really kind of a voyeur of like you watch people. I love people watching, and I've seen that guy in a bar at a college campus someplace, and I know who that character is. So I had fun with it. I had a lot of fun with that story.
It was like writing the woman part in the book as like it being a male. It was like writing the female character.
Yeah, so there was a story, the Mara Furlong story. She's, the main character is, the son starts to have these visions, and it's about a girl who went missing. And yeah, no, I think I understand. In this house we have, we're outnumbered 3-2, so.
I'll do it.
Yeah. You just take it from things that you read, you take it from your experiences. And again, I think men and women have similar thoughts from, for the most part on in situations that they get into like that. So I thought I had fun with that character too, because it was like, trying to solve a mystery of what happened to that girl. So,
How'd you
but
do the research for solving the mystery with the FBI and the crime people and all that when you're doing solving the cases?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm definitely looking things up. I'm definitely, what would the FBI and a lot of these FBI agents, God, if they behave that way, I would be a little bit, their scruples are, a little bit off. But, I don't know, but I think we live in a climate. Look at what went on with the Karen Reed trial, and law enforcement, FBI. Do we trust people? There's been a lot of situations in the U.S., and I think it goes back to. We'll go back to like Kennedy's assassination. It's like the government. Can we trust the government? Can we trust the agents of the government? And so I have a lot of those characters who kind of come into the mix too that, may not be on the level.
I know your book just came out. Well, what has been the reaction to it?
Pretty good. I mean, a lot of people that I work with are, certainly complimentary. I've had people buy, hey, I bought your book, I'm going to read it. Family, things like that. It's hard to become a bestseller on Amazon though. I'm just trying to figure out what the algorithm is to get the book out there. So I just did it in paperback. I didn't do a Kindle version yet, which is kind of my next move. But you know, I'm just I'm happy that I wrote it. I'm happy that I published it. I like the way it looks. To me, that's enough satisfaction. And moving on to the next project. I don't know much about the business of publishing. That's probably my biggest problem, or marketing, really. I just write the books. So
Yeah, it's like two different roles. You publish a book and then you go.
yeah,
You publish the book and then you go kind of to
yeah.
market, things like that. Um, I know probably know the answer to this question, but who inspired you to write when you were a kid?
Oh boy. I think, I mean, I'm the son of two educators. My dad was a teacher for many years, and then he got into administration, which is kind of funny because I never thought I'd get into administration. I swore that his schedule was um, too much, because I wanted to do the creative things. But my mom was a big influence on me. She was always reading. She was always, sharing literature with me. She was an English teacher. So she taught English for many years. And then, I really started to get creative in high school too. I had some great English teachers. I went to Bishop Feehan High School, the Shamrocks. And I know Chris Servant was he turned out to be president of the school, but he was my English teacher senior year. And he got me reading different things. Um, I had a science fiction class with Mr. Gagnon, who was one of our basketball coaches, actually.
I remember him.
And
I
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
remember he's a character. Liked
He
him a lot.
um he taught a science fiction class, and it was all short stories. And I was like, this is incredible. And it was probably the literary version of Black Mirror. It was a lot of Ray Bradbury, Kurt Vonnegut, a lot of those 1950s and 60s science fiction writers who kind of put science fiction on the map. So, but it really came from my English teachers, and I think you made journalism interesting, Mike. I wrote for the Globe, and I did a lot of school sports, but my strength more was with creating stories, and that's what I enjoyed to do. The nonfiction reporting stuff, the journalism. I was decent at it, but I always wanted to write like a flowery, intro or something. And Larry Ames,
Another legend.
remember Larry Ames,
Yeah.
who was
Another,
my boss at the Globe, the famous Larry Ames. He didn't want any of those flowery intros. He wanted just the facts. So, so that's where I kind of had the idea to get into it. But it took me a while because I didn't end up going to grad school until I think I was about 28 years old. So,
well,
I
Mike,
taught for a while. Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show and being our 15th guest. I really
Oh,
appreciate
wow.
it. You're on the top of my list to get you on it. I want to thank everybody for watching Stoughton Writers Group on TV, and stay tuned for the upcoming episodes. Have a good day.